To order. Welcome to meeting number 8 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan, created pursuant to the order of the House of December 8th, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format, pursuant to the House order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in this room to please follow the recommendations from public health authorities as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Witnesses should also be aware that translation in English and French is available through the globe icon at the bottom of their screen. As we had discussed during the last meeting number 7 on March 28th, I wanted to outline for the members the tentative schedule for the next few weeks following the break weeks. On April 25th, we will have Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Canadian Citizenship and his officials, Minister Sean Fraser. That he will be here for the first hour. And then for the second hour, we will have Minister of Foreign Affairs and Department officials with Minister Melanie Joly. On May the 2nd meeting, in the first hour, we will have the tentative witnesses will be Afghan interpreters Masood Mateen Hotak, Jamie Kosani, and Jarif Mayer. For the second hour, tentatively, we will have the witnesses Warda Sajadi Megan, International Women of Judges Association, Rainbow Railroad, and Robert St. Aban. On May the 9th, for the first hour, we will have Minister Anita Anand, Minister of National Defense, and her department officials. For the second hour, we will have Canadian Armed Forces members and department officials. After May 9th, we will begin a report beginning with the drafting instructions on May 16th, and hopefully a report consideration on May 30th and June 6th. We have been instructed by the House to present our report by June 8th as per the motion creating this special committee. Is everyone okay with that plan? Madam Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was informed that for the week of April 11th, originally we were to have witnesses. However, witnesses would not be able to come on April 11th. And so I'd like to propose that for April 11th, that we invite former Afghan interpreters to come to fill that slot. And I would be able to submit their names and information for the clerk.
Madam Kwan, I just want clarification. Is it the same witnesses that we are talking about, the witnesses that are scheduled on May the 2nd?
No, they're not.
They're different?
Yes.
Okay, and is it the will of the committee to? Okay, I don't see any opposition, so I'll instruct on behalf of the committee, Madam Clerk, to please arrange that on April the 11th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to committee members, and I'll make sure that that information is passed on to the clerk to make the contacts.
Thank you. I would now like to welcome here today the Honorable Harjit Singh Sajjan, Minister of International Development and Minister responsible for Pacific Economic Development Agency of Canada, and of course, formerly the Minister of National Defense. Accompanying Minister Sajjan is Deputy Minister of International Development, Christopher McLennan, and also from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, I would like to welcome Assistant Deputy Minister, Asia Pacific, Paul Thopil, Director General, International Crime and Terrorism, Jennifer Lotan, Director General, International Humanitarian Assistant, Stephen Silves, Executive Director and Senior General Counsel, Patrick Hill. On behalf of the committee members, I welcome each of you again, and I understand that, Minister, you will be with us for the first hour until 7:30 p.m., and the department officials will remain with us for the second hour from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Is that correct? Thank you. Minister, you have 5 minutes for your opening statements. Please be mindful of the time allotted as members can interact and field questions to you. The floor is yours, Minister. Please begin for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for having me here today. So Canada has a long history of supporting the Afghanistan people. Over 2 decades, we have seen Canadian development funding that helped a generation of Afghans achieve a higher standard of living. The resettlement of thousands of Afghan refugees to Canada and 40,000 Canadians bravely served in Afghanistan from December 2001 until 2014. Our focus has been on the people of Afghanistan, supporting development, peace and security, and humanitarian aid for the Afghan people. However, since the Taliban takeover in August, we have seen an appalling regression on many of these gains. And most disturbing, the Taliban continued its zealous and ideological intolerance for the equality of women and girls. And this must stop. Also, the humanitarian situation is dire. In 2022, the UN estimates that 24 million people inside Afghanistan require humanitarian assistance. They urgently need food assistance, treatment for malnutrition, shelter, and access to basic health services. Right now, there are 23 million people, half of Afghanistan's population, are acutely food insecure, including 8.7 million people who are at risk of famine. And almost 5 million people in Afghanistan will require treatment for acute malnutrition, including 2.8 million children. Currently, 6.5 million people are lacking appropriate shelter and supplies to survive Afghanistan's harsh winters. And 3 million children under 5 and 3.4 million women of reproductive age will require emergency health services in 2022 alone. And in this immense suffering, we cannot lose sight of those Afghan women and girls. They have been disproportionately impacted by this food insecurity, which has only been made worse by Russia's unjustifiable war in Ukraine. And their lives have been uprooted and destroyed because of the Taliban's unjustifiable discrimination against women and girls. We must continue to stand up in their defense, and we must ensure that our support meets the unique needs that women and girls have. In the face of these multiple crises, Canada is focused on helping. We're supporting experienced humanitarian partners that are delivering results on the ground, helping to provide food, nutrition, shelter, and health care. And last week, I announced that Canada is providing an additional $50 million for a total of $143 million in 2022 to help support the people of Afghanistan, particularly women and girls. Currently, the World Food Program is delivering food assistance, a critical need where half the population is food insecure. With our support, the World Food Program, which amounts to over half of Canada's recent humanitarian assistance, they have provided 13 million people with the food they desperately need. We also support UNICEF's procurement of the ready-to-use therapeutic food, which treats cases of severe acute malnutrition in children under 5, helping to save over 56,000 children from dying of starvation. And we are partnering with international organizations for migrations, who, along with other humanitarian partners, have helped provide over 500,000 people with shelter, fuel, heaters, and winter clothing. The ICRC is supporting hospitals and the staff who work in them to help prevent total collapse of the health services in Afghanistan. And they continue to scale up their efforts with Canadian support. I want to thank our humanitarian partners who are doing critical work in Afghanistan and the region. They operate on the front lines of this response day after day under challenging circumstances. Afghanistan is on the brink, and we know know our partners need more help to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe. It is why Canada will continue to be part of the solution, with our humanitarian response since August being the largest it has ever been for Afghanistan. And in 2022, Canada's humanitarian assistance will be $143 million. We will continue to work to address the pressing humanitarian needs, including access to humanitarian relief, healthcare, and education. And we will continue to fight for the women and girls' rights. We will continue to be there for the people of Afghanistan. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I'll take your questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister, staying within the time frame. Before we begin the rounds, all members of Parliament, you know that I hate cutting you off when you're questioning the members, so please keep an eye on your clock today as well, so all the members can have time with the ministers. First round of questions will be for 6 minutes, and we will begin with my own member and my friend, Madam Finley, followed by Mr. Sidhu, then Mr. Brunel Desep, and Madam Kwan. Ms. Finley, please begin for 6 minutes of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, Deputy Minister. You know, we have a short amount of time, so I'm going to just get to my questions. As the former Minister of National Defense, can you tell us what role you played in the planning, execution of, and evacuation of Canadians and Canadian allies from Afghanistan?
Well, Mr. Chair, as Minister of National Defense, we obviously played a very important role in the evacuation when the security situation drastically decreased, especially for our personnel in our embassy.
And in terms of the evacuation, how actively involved were you at the time in terms of being kept informed, and how much time did you spend in the command center?
Mr. Chair, during that time, I was solely focused on the mission to Afghanistan.
Solely focused on the mission, but I'm asking about the evacuation itself.
Yes, the evacuation, that's what I'm talking about. The mission, that time, our sole focus was the evacuation in Afghanistan at that time. I understand.
And what proactive steps did you take to get people who may have been your colleagues or even friends out of Afghanistan during the evacuation?
Which time frame are you referring to?
During the time of...
The chair, then it's much easier.
Well, I started saying that. I assumed you understood that. Through the chair, to you, Minister, I'm asking, at the time of evacuation, when people were actually leaving, what proactive steps did you take to get people who have been your colleagues or even friends out of Afghanistan during that evacuation?
No, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. During that time, as the security situation was decreasing, there was a request from Global Affairs to provide security for the embassy personnel, something I authorized in early April. And after that, because the situation was drastically deteriorating, the team on the ground, which we increased, changed their support toward the evacuation, as many people as possible at that time.
Through the chair, Minister, when did the military start planning the evacuation of Canadians and Canadian allies from Afghanistan?
Mr. Chair, as I stated, when we received a request from Global Affairs Canada, now keep in mind, we did not have a military footprint in the country since 2014. So when the request came from Global Affairs Canada that they required greater assistance from the military for the security of our personnel doing assessments, that's it was actually early April, April 1st, when I approved the request.
Sorry, when?
April 1st.
April 1st. And we heard testimony from the then ambassador, Minister, through the chair, that they had very little warning. When they left, frankly, in a pretty big hurry, that Kabul would fall. And yet we heard other testimony that for some months, veterans and others in the national defense sphere knew this was happening. So when would you say that you as minister were aware that, we were really in danger of Kabul falling?
Mr. Chair, during that time, we were proactive because the situation on the ground was deteriorating. A request came from Global Affairs Canada I, as a minister of national defense, cannot authorize troop deployments into a country. There had to be a request. Once a request was made, it was authorized the very next day. Our troops went into theater to do the assessment, and because of the team that we had on the ground, they were able to start assessing the situation. So we were monitoring things literally daily, and from that allowed us to pivot some of our work that we're doing to the evacuation as well.
And through the chair, were you able to share that intelligence in real time with the embassy?
Mr. Chair, in fact, actually, our people on the ground were working hand in glove with the embassy staff at that time. Because we've never, Mr. Chair, we hadn't had a footprint on the ground. Our team there, alongside with the embassy, who also had their own networks, they were working hand in glove together physically and feeding the information back to us.
Oh, and I guess my last question, Mr. Chair. With respect to the evacuation of embassy, the ambassador and embassy staff, which no doubt had become urgent, we've heard testimony that when they left in a plane that was only about half full. Can you confirm that?
Mr. Chair, I can't confirm exactly what the plane load was. What I can say, though, once the decision was made by our ambassador to leave, because an ambassador has the authority to do so. One thing I can say, the security situation was severely degrading, and the decision that was made was the appropriate one to get everybody out quick enough so that our Canadian officials were not put at risk.
Thank you, Madam Finley, and thank you for being respectful and professional while fielding your questions. And now we will go to Mr. Sidhu. Mr. Sidhu, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to first and foremost welcome Minister Sajjan to our committee and thank him for taking the time to be with us today. Minister Sajjan, I had the honor to welcome many Afghan Sikh refugees a few weeks ago at the airport, including little Tanvir Kaur, who was extremely energetic, playful, and looking forward to her childhood experiences in Canada, even after a lengthy flight. It was a moment that I will remember forever, and I know you have been working closely with the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation in their work to settle Afghan, Sikh, and Hindu refugees over many, many years. So thank you for your hard work on this incredibly important initiative. I saw firsthand what it meant to these families arriving in Canada, and a huge kudos to the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation for their tireless work in bringing the community together to welcome so many families from Afghanistan to a new and prosperous life here in Canada. Minister, in your opening remarks, you mentioned the inequality towards women and girls and how truly disturbing this is. Many of us on this committee have seen the news out of Afghanistan just a few weeks ago that the Taliban will not allow women and girls to go to school after the 6th grade. This is extremely disheartening and needs to change. Speaking of women and girls, Minister, through the chair, can you please tell us what Canada is doing to support women's education within Afghanistan?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I want to thank the member for the question, and also I want to take this opportunity to thank the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation for the tremendous work that they have done over the years. The situation in Afghanistan is extremely dire. The regression by the Taliban to bring in their old ideology that they had is extremely alarming. One thing, first of all, with the message that we're sending is that the education of women and girls is not negotiable. It is not, and you can't put a time or a grade limit to it either, as we have heard from recent news stories. So right now we're focused, because the humanitarian situation is so dire, we're providing immediate humanitarian support when it comes to food, health, and we will look at the other opportunities when it comes to education as well. But we cannot ever relent on the condition, which is for allowing unconditional access to school for girls.
Thank you for that, Minister. And Minister, you spoke a bit about food insecurity in the region. We know with the war in Ukraine, Ukraine, especially Eastern Ukraine, is the breadbasket for a lot of Europe and a lot of developing countries. Right now, one of the greatest issues facing the Afghan people right now is food insecurity. And what I know you mentioned a $50 million response. Can you speak to more about this response?
Yes, we've right after the country fell to the Taliban, we knew there was going to be a significant humanitarian crisis, and we wanted to make sure that we support the Afghan people. That's why early as December, we authorized funding to the World Food Program to provide that support. So right now, you do have the World Food Program getting majority of the funding to literally provide to save lives. That's what this is about. And when I spoke with David Beasley, who runs the World Food Program, of making sure that there is equitable distribution as well, and to make sure that women and girls and minority groups across the country get the support that they need. Plus, we're providing additional support through different NGOs to making sure that women and girls also get the appropriate attention as well.
Thank you for that. And we've had many witnesses, Mr. Chair, through you, and we've had many witnesses on our committee come and speak to us from a lot of NGOs about the access to Afghanistan in terms of aid delivery, humanitarian assistance, and many different issues that are arising from that. And we know there's the counterterrorism provisions in the criminal code that don't make things as easy as we wish they would be. But Minister, if you can tell us how Canada is still able to deliver humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan despite the provisions in place in the criminal code.
No, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for that, the member's question. Yes, there is a current law in place, and Taliban is a known and registered terrorist entity. So we have to abide by the law. And when it comes to the support, humanitarian support that we're providing through our partners, the humanitarian support is getting through, and we are able to work with those partners. Because of the current law, there are certain restrictions that we are in place because of this. So we're currently exploring options on the next steps. Now, keep in mind, majority of the work and the support that is needed is in the humanitarian space, and we are able to provide the appropriate humanitarian emergency support. But we are exploring other options with the appropriate departments to look at the next steps if the situation was to change in Afghanistan.
Mr. Sidhu.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
20 seconds, 15 seconds now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just take some time just to thank the minister and the whole team at Dev and Global Affairs for their ongoing work. It's definitely a challenging time, but I do appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu, and particularly, raising Manmeet Singh Puller Foundation. I'm sure it's, Manmeet being a former minister in Alberta, was very near and dear to all of us. Thank you. And now we'll go to Mr. Bruno Desep for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Minister for being with us this evening. It's very much appreciated. And we've just heard the Minister talk to us about the NGOs in the field and the humanitarian assistance, and I assume that there's a problem for some NGOs to bring in humanitarian assistance because of the Canadian Criminal Code provisions.
Because of the current the law that's in place, it's not preventing us to provide the humanitarian support. Obviously, organizations do know the parameters in our Canadian law that stipulates on how we can give money right now. But we are able to work with organizations like the UN, International Red Cross, and some other organizations who are able to work within the parameters that we have. However, we are exploring options on what are the next steps of what are the things that we can do to work through some of those concerns.
Je comprends, sauf qu'il y a plusieurs ONG.
There are a number of NGOs who have come to the committee to tell us that that is a problem for them. this has been repeated. If you want to look at the committee's transcripts, and I think we have to help them in their work. And with regard to the difficulty of providing humanitarian assistance, I proposed a motion that we're asked to facilitate the role of NGOs in humanitarian assistance in endangered zones. And they have told us here at this committee that this would be a very worthwhile motion, and I proposed it the next day, and the Liberal government refused to support it, and even your own party was not in agreement with the motion. And so if I submit this motion again, can I count on you to put pressure on your colleagues to not oppose it this time?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the honourable member's question. One is, when it comes to the actual law itself, all of us have to abide by it. It's not something that I can just facilitate. But having said that, I have heard also and spoken to a lot of the NGOs, and especially Kenyan NGOs, who have done tremendous work, and the impact that this law has. However, it doesn't prevent us from providing humanitarian support through organizations like the United Nations. This is one of the reasons why we are exploring the options within this law, looking at what other opportunities in terms of what we can do, whether it's from everything from having.
But they told it that this was keeping them from doing their work the way we would like to. But they said that, and I can show you that what they said. Their testimony said that they weren't able to provide 100% of the assistance that they want to. But do you know what our allies do? Because the Americans, the Europeans have adapted and modified their laws.
I would respectfully say if you can come through that chair and please don't.
Monsieur le Président, je suis vraiment désolé. Je suis nouveau ici, Monsieur le Président.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm new at the committee.
To answer the member's question directly, those are the things that we're looking when I say exploring options. We are looking at what other nations are doing. The law is currently in place, and we have to follow it. And our other partners that we normally work with do understand the law itself. I've spoken to many of them, heard their concerns directly, and I know that the tremendous work that they can do. This is one of the reasons why we are actively exploring other options, looking at other nations, how they, what they do, and that's what we're exploring for ourselves, what the next steps could be.
But why is it taking so long? Why have the Americans, the Europeans, been able to amend their laws, and you're still exploring? I don't understand. Can the minister tell us why in Canada it always takes longer, whereas the Americans, the Europeans seem to be able to adapt to the situation?
Mr. Chair, so our law is currently it's where it's at. We can't. There's certain parameters set by it. The U.S. already have certain laws in place that allows their certain NGOs to be able to conduct that work. So it's already in place. That's why they're able to act right now, and this is why we are now exploring what type of options that we need to. If you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can have one of our officials that can explain what the U.S. Current structure is, if you'd like.
Go ahead, Deputy Minister.
Sure. Thank you very much. Oops, sorry. Thank you very much. Donc, pour répondre à...
So to answer the question, in fact, the problem we have is that every country has its legal framework, different legal framework. And for the U.S., I'm not an expert on the U.S., but they already had a mechanism in their laws that allowed for certain flexibility for some activities outside of the legal framework. But it was something that already existed in American law. But the problem for Canada is that since 2002, the law in Canada, we do not have a similar mechanism in Canada, so we have to change the law. And how much time would that take? Chair, do I have any time?
Time is up, and we'll come back to this. Thank you kindly. And now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and his official for coming to the committee. I'd like to actually just follow up on this issue. World Vision Canada actually said, the President said, and I quote, at World Vision Canada, we have funding and supplies that are needed now, but we cannot send to our teams on the ground. And just one example, we had 2 containers ready to ship full of packets of ready-to-use therapeutic food, which is used to treat children facing the severest form of malnutrition. It was heartbreaking that we had to say no. This is because the Taliban is on Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act's list of terrorist entities. The view is that payment of direct and indirect taxes or fees to them in any form, even for goods like these, will be a violation of this Canadian law. And then she goes on to talk about the criminal code and so on. Now, the government's been aware of this from witnesses who's testified. They have been aware of this since August. That's 8 months ago. And there is still no workaround. There's still no resolution. Meanwhile, children are dying. That is the reality of what's happening on the ground. So my question to the minister, who's continuing to study this issue, how long is it really going to take? And how many more children will have to die until they actually find a resolution?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I appreciate the member's question, but I want to make it very clear. The current law, in terms of our support, has not prevented us, all the funding that we provided for the immediate emergency humanitarian need for people, especially for children. We're working with partners who have experience to be able to deliver all the appropriate support to the women and children who actually need it. But when it comes to this law, as I stated, it does pose a challenge for some organizations who are not able to meet the current parameters that we have. But the immediate need right now is for emergency humanitarian assistance, which we are able to deliver.
Well, the minister must realize, Mr. Chair, through you to him, that there is a huge number of people who have needs. Even Canada's contribution is not going to be sufficient. And so World Vision, as well as Care Canada and other Canadian-based organizations, cannot get this work done. They have resources that they've received from other sectors, but they have the food packets, the medicine, that are ready to go, sitting in containers that they cannot deliver. So I appreciate that in the meantime, some work is being done, and it should be done. It needs to continue to be done. But there is zero justification in this urgent situation that additional resources not put on the ground and be allowed to put on the ground. Now, I asked the question to the President and other NGOs to say that if Canada were to indicate and enter into an agreement with them, a letter of understanding, a memorandum of understanding and such, to say that for them to deliver care packets and such on the ground to children, to starving children and children dying of malnutrition, that they would not be prosecuted under Canada's criminal code. That would actually suffice for them to do this work. Is the minister looking at this option?
Mr. Chair, I'm glad the member actually raised this question. In fact, actually, we have been looking at all the various options, speaking to the organizations directly. But I just want to reiterate once again is that all the funding that we're providing is actually getting to the people that need it. But I'd like to have Patrick Hill answer the legal question.
No, sorry,
provide
actually,
greater details if possible.
Mr. Chair, I'd like the minister answer this question. How much longer do these organizations have to wait until he finds a resolution and puts it in operation?
The member, because
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer the question. I can't give a timeline. I wish I could, but right now, as a Minister of International Development, I have to work within the current law that we have. And one thing I can assure, Mr. Chair, you, all this member, and an entire House, is that we are not going to leave any stone unturned to provide the support for the Afghan people, and that's exactly what we have done. And it's the reason why we announced our funding very quickly and as early as last December, and we've continually do so and been monitoring the situation on the ground for the immediate humanitarian needs. But also to alleviate this, we have been actively working on options with other departments so that we can find a solution for this.
Well, I have to say this. Mr. Chair, the minister can repeat the same answer over and over again as he's turning pebble by pebble to unturn, each rock that he wants to overturn to find the answers. It's been 8 months. I'm sorry. It is not good enough. And the witnesses have actually said that the government does not feel the urgency of the situation. And I think we have just seen that witnessed right now from the minister's answer. They do not feel the urgency of the situation to act. Other countries have done it. Canada is the only nation who's not been able to resolve this issue. Mr. Chair.
Minister, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Mr. Chair, I respectfully completely disagree with the member's assertions there. To say that I don't feel the urgency, I feel the urgency. I've seen the famine that takes place on the ground. I've seen the positive impact that humanitarian aid can deliver, and that's one thing I can assure you that we have acted, and will continue to act very quickly to making sure the humanitarian support gets there, even as we work through this.
Excuse me,
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Madam Kwan. You have your time, and
but just
I will come back to you in the next. I will come back to the next.
It's the witnesses who made that assertion.
Mr. Chang. You please go ahead for your 5 minutes of round, and you will be followed by Madam Jahid and then Mr. Bruno Desab for 2.5 minutes, and then Madam Kwan will come to you for 2.5 minutes after that. So, Mr. Chang, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister said that planning for the evacuation from Kabul began when Global Affairs requested it of the Department and the Canadian Armed Forces on April 1st. When was that plan completed?
Mr. Chair, when it comes to the planning, we sent in a military team at the request of Global Affairs for the.
When did you send in that military team?
I authorized it on April 1st.
Oh, you authorized, so they flew into Kabul.
I don't have the exact date.
But shortly thereafter, they flew into Kabul.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can't.
You being the minister, you understand that
no, I understand.
Instead of having a fight, if we can have through the chair a respectful conversation,
sure.
I would really respect that.
And so I just want to clarify for the record. So shortly after you authorized it on April 1st, a military team went into Kabul.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I got the request. The following day, it was approved.
Sure.
And I don't remember the exact date, but it was as quickly as possible.
Sure. So within days or so. Okay. So when was that plan completed?
So the team went on the ground. I don't have this was a very fluid situation, obviously, monitoring what the security needs were. There was no plan right at that time to evacuate even the embassy staff. Because we had a team on the ground now, we can have a much better understand the situation.
So let me ask the question differently. Was the plan completed by June 1st?
Mr. Chair, there wasn't the situation on the ground. This is not a typical thing where you're creating an actual plan. We, based on the situation on the ground, first we assessed in terms of as the situation deteriorating, we shifted the focus immediately in trying to bring as many people back.
Okay, that's fine. When did you receive intelligence that Afghanistan, particularly Kabul, was going to fall?
I don't have, Mr. Chair, remember the exact time frame for it, but we were monitoring the situation at that time on a daily basis.
Okay.
And hence the reason why we.
So you don't recall a date that
I don't have the date offhand.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the government went into caretaker mode on August 15th, Sunday, August 15th, the same day that the writs were issued by the Governor General for the general election, the same date that Kabul fell. My question for the minister is, how did the minister's involvement in the evacuation change because of the shift into the caretaker convention?
Mr. Chair, my responsibility, Minister of Defense, did not change. I continue to work on the evacuation.
So there was no change after August 15th?
I continue to work until our airplanes could not bring any more people out.
Okay, so in other words, there was no change in your role or responsibility with respect to the evacuation out of Kabul or August 15th. Is that correct?
I continue to work yes.
Okay. The last flight left on August 26th from Kabul, the last Canadian flight, who made the decision that that would be the last flight to depart from Kabul?
All the decisions are based on the military advice that is provided, and based on the military advice, that was the decision that was made.
Okay.
And remember, Mr. Chair, we weren't working alone. We're working with a lot of our allies and coordinating with many nations in a very close proximity was extremely complicated. So that coordination had to be done, and so the
Understood.
Decision was made on the
there were a lot
advice
of allies involved in the evacuation, I understand, and there were NATO allies involved, and so there were different flights from different member states of NATO that were departing from Kabul, trying to evacuate some 70,000 people in the latter half of August of last year. Were you involved with any flights that departed from Hamid Karzai Airport, either on Canadian planes or on planes of allies that departed with empty seats, that you were involved with the coordination of those flights?
I'm not sure what was I, in terms of what involvement are you,
there were reports of flights that were leaving from...
Let Minister finish.
He asked me to clarify, so I'm clarifying. There were flights that left from Hamid Karzai International Airport that were not full flights. There were seats that were empty on these flights. And I'm asking you, Minister, if you were involved with the coordination of the passengers for those seats on any of those flights that departed Kabul in August of last year.
The operational...
His time is up, and we'll come back to this again. Thank you, Honorable Chong. We'll go to Madam Yahid for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Minister, for appearing before the committee. Minister, we have heard very powerful testimony at this committee about the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and the challenges of delivering the aid to the most in need. I was really glad to see the announcement last week that Canada has committed an additional $50 million in humanitarian aid, raising Canada's total commitment for humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan and the neighboring countries to $143 million. So I would like to ask about the $93 million which was previously announced. How much of that money has actually flowed, and if where have we delivered it, and how that money is being used?
Mr. Chair, if I can have my Deputy Minister answer that question in more detail, it would be more appropriate.
As long as Madam Jayed, you don't have any objection.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much. So the humanitarian aid, it flows on an ongoing basis. We work directly with partners to ensure that we release the money to them on a timescale that makes sense for them in terms of the procurement of the goods that they're providing and also their ability to get it into the country. So our principal partners with the first tranches of humanitarian assistance that we're using was the World Food Program, has been mentioned earlier. It's been recognized the critical importance of the food security situation in Afghanistan, the fact that there are upwards of 22 million people that are in need of food assistance, some of them in very dire situations. So the World Food Program was one of the very first choices there. A second organization that we work with very closely is UNICEF. UNICEF provides dedicated supports for food security, including the ready-to-use packets that are required for children.
93 million, all that money has flowed out in the form of humanitarian aid.
Yes.
93 million, which was previously announced.
If you can come to the chair.
Sorry, Chair, through Chair.
No problem.
I would just like if you can please clarify that how our laws around the terrorism provisions in the criminal code are for the Taliban, how the laws in the other countries are different that they have been able to work around. So if you can put some light on that.
Sure, I can answer.
Madam, yeah, you okay? Deputy Minister answering? Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned previously, this is actual Canadian national law. So every single country has its own national frameworks for managing terrorist financing. Within each of those individual frameworks, some countries have put in special measures that allow them to permit things such as a licensing scheme or a way of permitting certain activities that otherwise would be deemed to be a contravention of the code. The individual examples of that, I'm not an expert on other countries' terrorist financing, criminal and otherwise national frameworks, but fundamentally that's what it is that they have a mechanism of some sort that permits them to do it.
Thank you. Through Chair, what is Canada doing to support women's right advocacy within Afghanistan? If I can ask the Minister to please answer that.
Mr. Chair, and through you, this is something that we have raised in every conversation we had with any partner that's going to be working in Afghanistan. In fact, also we are funding 3 different organizations that focus strictly on this. One is War Child Canada Relief International and the UNFPA. But all our work emphasizes to making sure that all our support goes to, in an equitable fashion, to making sure that there's an equal distribution for women and girls and minority groups across the country.
45 seconds, Madam.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. My next question is around women's education. Minister, supporting the right for women and girls to have equal access to education is a cornerstone of Canada's feminist foreign policy, and your department funds programs around the world to help women and girls get an education. Many in my constituency are fundraising to sponsor female students to attend the Bayan Institute of Higher Education and other institutions. So what is Canada doing to support women's education in Afghanistan, as well as ensuring women and girls that are refugees in neighboring countries can have access to schooling?
10 seconds, Minister.
We are supporting neighbor countries, Mr. Chair, but also one of the things that we're probably most important is strongly advocating with our like-minded partners to making sure that there is no restriction of girls going to school, and even going up to grade 12 is not acceptable to us. It has to be unconditional.
Thank you, Madam Jahid. Now we'll go to Mr. Brunel Desep for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much. The NGOs who can't do their work as they would like because of this Canadian law. It's like a film, in a film where you have people around a table, a committee that's trying to decide what's going on, and then the committee tries to develop solutions that talk about all the options, but yet in Afghanistan, there are families who have to sell their children to get funds to feed their families. We have women and children who are dying of hunger, and the elderly. And in this kind of situation, we're still looking for solutions. Can the minister tell the committee how long it's going to take to analyze the situation, to develop a solution, and how long he's going to take to give NGOs a real solution to help Afghanis now?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I just want to reiterate that even though with the current law is not preventing us from providing the humanitarian support that is needed on the ground. So that will continue. In terms of some NGOs not being able to do their work in Afghanistan because of the current laws that we have, as I said, I can't give a timeline. One thing I can assure the member and everyone here is that our department is working with Department of Justice and the Public Safety to figure out what is the best step to move forward.
Avec tout respect, Monsieur le Président.
With all due respect, if the minister needs help in finding a solution, I'm ready to help.
J'en ai assez entendu. Merci.
Thank you very much for your suggestion, Mr. Bruno Desep. Minister, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Mr. Chair, I'm always happy to accept any member of Parliament willing to offer advice and how we can do our job better.
Thank you. 25 seconds, Mr. Bruno Desep.
Well, in that case, I'm to come meet with you in your office, and I hope we can find a solution very quickly.
Minister?
Look forward to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Desep. And now we will proceed to Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to add to that, I've written also to the minister on the same issue. I have yet to receive a response. I think that was back in February when the letter was sent. So I'd be happy to offer suggestions as to what the minister and the government can do to address this urgent situation. I'd like to actually ask the question of the minister this. He mentioned that there were flights that, actually witnesses mentioned that there were flights that had left in the evacuation process that were half empty. So I wonder if the minister can provide this committee with information on the number of flights that have left on the evacuation that were where seats were left unfilled, and how many of those seats were in each of those flights. Can we have that information tabled to the committee, please?
Minister, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair, one thing I can say is during that time, in times of crisis like this, a lot of the decision making is make sure that the people on the ground have the appropriate delegation authority to make those decisions. And I also just want to take the opportunity to thank the Canadian Armed Forces for the tremendous work that they did in extremely difficult circumstances. But I'm not the Minister of Defense now, and those requests will have to flow through Minister Anand.
One.
Oh, I'm actually trying to get the stats on how many flights were evacuated and how many seats were on those flights and how many of those seats were filled with people. And then from there, of the people that filled the seats, how many of them were Afghan nationals and how many of them were people who worked for the embassy or Canadian workers. Can we have that information table for the committee?
Minister, you have 35 minutes to respond. 35 seconds to respond.
Mr. Chair, that question again will have to that information is held within the Ministry of Defense. But one thing I can say is our folks. One is creating that air bridge was extremely important. The work that Canada did to bring that together, and our folks on the ground did amazing work to get as many people out. And I just want to take this opportunity again to commend them because I every single day to being able to witness the tremendous work that they did.
Thank you,
made us proud.
Minister.
Kwan, your time is up, and we'll come back to the next round now. And next round, we have 3 minutes each to go to. First, I will go to Madam Finley for 3 minutes, and then Mr. El-Khoury for 3 minutes, and that will end up the round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to give the minister an opportunity just to flesh this out a bit. So my question to the minister is whether he was directly involved with any flights, Canadian or Allied flights, that left Afghanistan that were not full.
Mr. Chair, I do not recall the manifest or the number of people in each aircraft. But one thing I can say for certain, our folks on the ground were is trying to get as many people out as quickly as possible. And the decision that they made, I knew that they were made with that intention in mind. And again, I just want to thank them for the work that they did.
Mr. Chair, we're well aware in this committee, certainly, of the chaos that was happening at the airport and with the evacuation generally, and I think we all are very grateful for those who created those air bridges and the work they did. But these questions, of course, are about the ones left behind. And although many were brought out, many were left behind. And we've heard that there are identifiable groups that got left behind, women who were judges, for instance, or some ethnic minorities, such as Sikh members of the community. So was there any work done to try and specifically by this minister to get those specific groups out?
Mr. Chair, I'm glad the member raised it. Trying to get vulnerable groups out was a priority for us. And our folks on the ground were taking every opportunity where they could. We were successful in some cases, and they weren't successful in others. But this is something that I think the members, and I know personally well, of what was taking place on the ground, and our folks did just tremendously amazing things to make this happen, and putting themselves at risk And when it comes to the vulnerable groups, yes, to your question, not just those two groups, but many others as well.
Honourable Member, you have 50 seconds still.
With respect to, again, this intelligence sharing at the time leading up to this, there's been a lot of concern expressed that the government could have acted quicker, started evacuation quicker. Mr. Chair, does the Minister agree that evacuation efforts should have started earlier?
25 seconds, Minister, to respond.
Mr. Chair, the evacuation started as soon as we felt that when the situation was deteriorating. And keep in mind, we've never had a footprint on the ground. By sending that team in, gave us far more understanding what was taking place, and evacuation started as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Madam Finley, for your questions. And I will now go to Mr. Al Khoury for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, and welcome to this committee. And thank you for all the good job you are doing when you were as a Minister of Defense and in your new portfolio now. You're doing a great job. And the announcement you made last week and today you spoke about it in the chamber. You're really doing a great job, and your presence gives us a clear idea by your illustration, the way you answering the question. We are knowing up to a very good degree of understanding what is going on and the urgency of the situation. My first question, Mr. Minister, feel free if you wanna answer, or your Deputy Minister, because due to the fact I am from Quebec, I would like to speak in French here. Quelles mesures pourraient être prises?
What measures could be adopted by the international community, including Canada, with a view to addressing the economic and financial crisis affecting Afghanistan?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I look forward to one day also conversing with you in French as I work in improving mine. We have to look at the immediate crisis that's before us. And right now, it's making sure that people have enough food. And that's what we're really focused on. The numbers that are extremely dire, so we're strictly focused on that. We also have to be extremely mindful that there is a Taliban regime currently in power. So humanitarian support that we're providing is absolutely, we're moving full scale ahead. We're also mindful that any actions that we take do not inadvertently legitimize the Taliban as well. So we're very mindful of that. We want to make sure that we hold the Taliban to account for their actions right now. And what we're seeing right now is not something that we did not want. So we want to make sure that we're sending a message that we're here to support the Afghan people, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. If the Taliban regime is to allow all girls to unconditionally go to school regardless of grade and post-secondary, those are the things that will make it better for them in terms of what further steps that we as an international community can do for Afghanistan. But right now we're focused on the humanitarian needs.
Mr. El Khoury.
Okay. Quelles sont les difficultés?
What are the difficulties in the field caused by the Taliban administration?
Taliban on the ground in order to hammer your efforts in continuing distributing food or any other assistance?
So from our reports right now, from the World Food Program, some others, that we are able to get the food out to the various places. In fact, actually, they're able to go to places that they weren't able to go before, that they were originally controlled by the Taliban. But the concerns right now are about the Taliban leadership making decisions that not allowing girls to have secondary education, having a chaperone for when they have to travel long distance. That's unacceptable to us. So as we provide humanitarian support, which we're able to get through now, we still have to be mindful of everything else is going on. So our message has been very clear. We will be there to provide humanitarian support.
Sorry to interrupt, Minister. The time is up. And on behalf of all members and the committee, Minister, thank you for appearing, and also to Deputy Minister as well. Thank you for your presentation. I suspend the meeting for a few minutes so we can get ready for the second hour. And within the meantime, Minister, you can interact with members if you have time. Back to order. And thank you again to all the members being very respectful during the first hour. And now we'll go to the second hour with the officials. And I would request, again, members, please respect the time and also particularly mention who you would be putting your question to. And first round, 6 minutes each. And we'll start with Mr. Raff, and then we'll go to Mr. Baker, then Mr. Bruno Desepp, and Madam Kwan. So, Mr. Raff, you go ahead, please, for 6 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. So my first question will be to the ADM, Mr. Thopel, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How long have you been in your position? Were you in the position you're currently in during the fall of Kabul last August?
Mr. Chair, yes, I was.
Excellent. Could you just explain who was all involved in the decision to pull our embassy staff and shut the embassy down in mid-August?
Mr. Chair, I believe the minister explained that our ambassador has the delegated authority, all our ambassadors, based on protocol globally, depending upon a crisis, has the delegated authority in order to make the decision on whether or not to close the embassy, depending upon the situation on the ground.
Thanks. My next question will be to Ms. Lowton, and again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Can you explain just a little bit more the current ongoing threat, and I'm assuming based on your position that you'd understand the crime, the terrorism linkages into Afghanistan, but the current threat to those Afghan minorities, Afghan women and children in Afghanistan as it stands right now with the Taliban back in control?
Lowton.
Yes, thank you for the question. The Taliban represents a threat in as much as they have a fundamentalist ideology that is very anti-women's rights, and it's a very dangerous regime from an anti-terrorism perspective. I think the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that it's a volatile and dangerous situation where several violent extremist organizations are also on the ground and active in Afghanistan.
So just to expand on that, I will not disagree with you. I do have firsthand experience on the ground in Afghanistan. I know how terrible the situation, even in the best of times, was under a legitimate democratic government, the challenges in that country. And I've seen what the Taliban are capable of doing, and that's why I just think it's so vital that Canada does everything in our power to get these refugees or these Afghans that are facing prosecution and threat to the Taliban, to get them out immediately, and the focus needs to be on getting them out of country. Before I get on to my next question, but it's still to you, Ms. Loughton, is what is your professional assessment of the risk of Afghanistan becoming a safe haven for increased terrorism and terrorist cells and other organizations?
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a very complicated question. We work very closely with Five Eyes partners and a range of other intelligence partners who monitor specifically those situations and provide ongoing reporting. As to whether or not the Taliban is likely to become a safe haven, I think is going to be the result of a range of factors. They're looking currently for legitimization from international actors and from neighbors around them. And the degree to which they can organize themselves to make deals in those environments would have to do with what arrangements they make with the terrorist organizations at play in Afghanistan. One thing I can say is, based on the intelligence, and I'm sure that you're aware as well, sir, is that several of the terrorist organizations currently on the ground in Afghanistan have no interest in the Taliban's ability to develop the capacity to govern and to become a stable presence. So in addition to the possibility of them becoming a safe haven for organizations like Al-Qaeda, we also have to be looking out for violent situations and volatility that is generated from tensions between these organizations. I hope that answers your question. And again, there are many, many complex factors at play, and it really is an intelligence-based question.
No, that does help, especially your point about the other outside influences to keep the country destabilized. When did you first become aware of the potential threat of the Taliban retaking Afghanistan writ large, or taking the capital?
I would suggest that's a question for military intelligence. The degree to which they were in a position to overtake the country was something that took, I think, everybody by surprise. The timing, and certainly I think ADM Topil may have more to say about this, but the speed with which the US departure from Afghanistan converted into a situation where the Taliban were in control surprised, I think, the entire world. I won't go so far as to say it also surprised the Taliban, but I don't think any of us would have predicted an August fall of Kabul.
Well, I'll agree to disagree, I guess, on that. It did fall a lot faster than a lot of us thought it would. And I mean, I personally was disappointed in how fast it happened. However, I know as somebody that wrote about it publicly a month in advance of the actual fall and said we had 2 weeks at that time to get everybody out, I was disappointed we didn't. I guess my final question, again to you, Ms. Loughton, is what is your assessment of risks? Because one of the pushbacks we're getting and what we're hearing from especially IRCC is that we can't do the failure of or lack of biometrics. The threat is different when you say compare Afghanistan to Ukraine to get these Afghans out. What is the real risk? Because I don't actually accept that risk of these cells coming out of these women and children out of Afghanistan coming into Canada to get them out if we could create the corridors to get them out of there.
Can I just ask you to clarify your question, please?
10 seconds only.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. I'm just wanting to know, do you mean the risk to Canada of bringing refugees out?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and this is a sort of IRCC's field, but making sure that we screen carefully and that we provide protection to those who require it, but that we maintain a focus on the national security needs as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapp. And now we will go to Mr. Baker for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our officials for being here with us today. I want to ask I'll direct my questions to you, Mr. Topil. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, first of all?
Yes, Topil. Thank you very much.
Topil? Okay, Mr. Topil, thanks very much for being here. I'll direct my questions to you, and if you wanted, ask your colleagues to assist, I turn to you to decide that. So we've talked in this meeting during the portion with the minister about the counterterrorism provisions in the criminal code. And the reality is that we still need to deliver humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. So how are we, I think a lot of questions I get from a lot of constituents who ask me about this is, how are we actually still able to deliver humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, given these provisions? Could you respond to that?
Mr. Topil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start with an initial comment and then ask my colleagues, Stephen Salowitz and Jennifer Lotan and Patrick Hill, to further supplement. Obviously, the criminal code as currently defined has its constraints in terms of what we can do or not, but we do take into account what are the risk mitigation protocols that partners are able to put into place in order to give us assurance with regard to their degree of abiding to or adherence to the criminal code provisions. So we have to do a risk assessment based on our due diligence of each partner's ability to comply based on their kind of risk mitigation parameters to actually flow the funds on the ground without directly or indirectly providing benefit to the Taliban. Stephen?
General Stephen Selbit, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So indeed, that is the key part of our ability to respond in this kind of environment. It's working within the parameters of the law, working with partners who can mitigate the support, whether it's direct or indirect, to the Taliban. So, for example, I'll give you a very concrete example. With UNICEF, we work with UNICEF. We finance the procurement of RUTF, the ready-to-use therapeutic food that's critical for malnutrition, responding to malnutrition in under 5-year-olds. We procure that external to Afghanistan, so it's not impacted by the tax code of Afghanistan, and as such, sits outside of the is not affected by the counterterrorism law. So it's those types of mitigation measures we put in place to still be able to respond to the critical needs, but in a way that is within the parameters of the law.
That's helpful.
Executive Hill, Honorable Member, you want to continue with Mr. Hill?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my colleagues have answered the question. I really don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Member, back to you.
That's helpful. So what I'm hearing you say is we're using Canadian resources are being used to purchase goods, for example, as in the case of the example that you just provided, and those goods are then being, and maybe correct me if this is wrong, but then those goods are then being transferred or provided to partners who can deliver them to the people in need. Am I right?
That's exactly right. So the UNICEF is the main distributor of this therapeutic food. They bring it in with our support into Afghanistan. It's distributed through the NGO and other UN networks to support the response to malnutrition in the country.
Do you have any sense of what our impact has been in terms of delivering humanitarian aid of any kind into Afghanistan?
Sure. Well, I could give you some examples of our partners' activities in this context. Again, as the minister said during his intervention, the key needs on the ground are around food and malnutrition, as well as health. And so we've, through our programming to date, have provided $77.5 million to WFP. to support the procurement of food, but also the distribution of that food in Afghanistan. And if we look at the needs in terms of food insecurity, there's 22.8 million people who are food insecure in 2022 in Afghanistan. There's 4.7 million people who suffer from acute malnutrition. So the support that we provide through WFP is critical. In the first half of March, WFP reached 6.1 million people with food assistance. They're projecting their pipeline is such that they expect to reach 22 million people over the course of the year with food in Afghanistan. So those are some concrete examples.
Okay. And do you have a sense of Canada's contribution to those numbers?
Well, so from WFP's perspective, they have a budget requirement of $200 million US per month to feed Afghan citizens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silvage. Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Baker, your time is up, and we can go to Mr. Bruno Desep for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, Mr. Bruno Desep.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here this evening to help us discuss this report. And your minister has announced $50 million new dollars for the Afghan people. And how can the government ensure that this will actually reach the Afghan population?
Do you have a particular person that you want your question to?
J'ai dit, peut-être j'ai mal prononcé.
Okay. Thank
you. Mr. Topple.
Monsieur le Président, merci pour cette question, mais en fait, je pense c'est...
Thank you very much, but I think that Stephen Selowich would be better able to answer the question.
I'd be happy to answer the question.
Mr. Desep, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Silvage. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, I'm the Director General responsible for humanitarian assistance, and given the focus of our support right now on humanitarian assistance, so Canada works with a small number of very trusted partners who have a great deal of experience of working in these kind of environments. They have established measures in place to minimize the risks of misappropriation or diversion of humanitarian assistance, and to make sure that these emergency relief items go to the people who they are intended. Now, there are occasional incidents of diversion. There's no question about that. That happens in any high-risk environment, and in this case, it's no different. But it's not a systemic risk. It's a risk around criminality, where occasionally criminals take advantage of the system of humanitarian activities to take some of the goods. We get notifications about this. The systems are in place. They work. It's an unfortunate consequence of working in high-risk environments, though, that we do get these kind of small-scale diversions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can continue with you, Mr. Selowich. There was an announcement recently where $50 million for Afghanistan and for neighboring countries. What do you mean by neighboring countries, and how would they be involved?
Ms. Silvage.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chair, there are a substantial number of Afghans who've had to flee Afghanistan over the decades from conflict. There's approximately, I believe, 5.7 million in neighboring countries like Pakistan that are refuge to millions of Afghans. They've been there for a long time. The governments in the neighboring countries require assistance to help sustain those populations, and we support them through UNHCR as well as the World Food Program. We're also there, of course, looking for the future, should there be increased flows of populations from Afghanistan, to be in a position to support that as well.
Donc, mais est-ce que cet argent-là...
But Are these funds given directly to the countries? What kinds of assistance, what form of assistance is provided? Is it just go through the United Nations?
Ms. Silvage.
Pardon.
Mr. Chair, indeed, that's the case. We don't use humanitarian assistance to directly fund governments. We channel the funds, the resources through trusted partners, in this case, the UN, WFP, and UNHCR.
Parfait. C'est bien de le mentionner. C'était la raison.
Thank you very much. Thanks for pointing that out. And I have a question, perhaps more delicate. Perhaps Ms. Lawton can answer. A number of witnesses have said that, and this is what the witnesses said, it's not my personal opinion, but they said that it's less dangerous for NGOs since the Western forces have left. And does that mean that we should change our approach to the Taliban? How do you see this type of comment? I can tell you that we have the situation is still dangerous, relatively speaking, and it's changing very quickly. I know that there are NGOs who have worked with us, and the situation is continuing to be very dangerous. Do I have any time? And I've seen in the press that a Taliban delegation went to Switzerland, invited by NGOs, and with discussions with the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan concerning humanitarian assistance. What is the position of your ministry with regard to this kind of consultation? There, I have to ask my colleague to provide an answer. Thank you very much for the question. For Canada, it's very important. We have 4 priorities. First,
message of Afghanistan's individuals to Canada. Our second is to ensure an inclusive governance within Afghanistan for all Afghans. Our third is ensuring risk mitigation to counterterrorism. And our fourth is related to efficient and timely delivery of humanitarian assistance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel-Sepp. And now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the officials. My first question is for Mr. Topol. I'm wondering, with respect to Canada's relationship with diplomatic relationship with Pakistan, one of our goals, of course, as you've just indicated, is to help Afghans to get to safety, particularly those who help serve the Canadian military and their extended family members. We've heard from witnesses in different places that Afghan extended families are not able to get to Canada safely. Some of them have made it to Pakistan, and they're unable, for example, to get their visa or the exit visa. And those are always the reasons, it seems, as to why they cannot get to Canada safely. So my question to you is, what work is being done on a diplomatic level for Canada to work with the Pakistani government to help Afghans get to Canada safely?
Minister Topol, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, we have been working actively on the ground through our diplomatic mission in Pakistan with the Pakistani officials and ministers in terms of trying to have recognition of safe passage documents that have been provided to Afghans in order to cross border crossings such as the Torkham border gate. They have been very helpful throughout the crisis, whereby in the height of the crisis, been acknowledging acceptance of certain documents, but as time has evolved over time, has been a little bit more limiting in that. But quite frankly, they have been been very helpful to the extent that they can, given their large burden of hosting 3 million and not necessarily, and acknowledging their concerns of being a draw for more.
Are you still able to do that work now? Are you still able to work with them and continue to bring Afghans to Canada?
Quite frankly, given limited air routes out, there is an intermittent flow that happens through the Torkham border crossing gate between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so as we acknowledge the 10,000 Afghan that has come into our country last week since the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, a lot of that traffic has come through the border. And that is based on active discussions through officials, as well as through ministerial discussions as well.
To make arrangements for Canada to have evacuation flights leaving Pakistan to Canada?
Mr. Topel.
Mr. President, at this juncture, the Taliban do not support charter flights for the evacuation of Afghans. They want their Kabul airport to resume to normal commercial scheduled airline traffic. And therefore, there are limits to what like-minded countries, including Canada, can do in order to initiate evacuation charter flights.
What about evacuation charter flights from neighboring countries?
Mr. Topel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So where there is a significant numbers that have accumulated in terms of approved Afghans to be able to come to Canada, IRCC, to my knowledge, has been organizing passage for the Afghans to come, and I acknowledge as again the 10,000 milestone that was achieved last week.
If Afghans were able to get from Afghanistan to, let's say, Pakistan, I know of 300 families, former Afghan interpreters, extended family members are trying to get to safety and unable to do so because IRCCs have not processed their application. But other witnesses at this committee have said, leave that to us. We will get to a third country ourselves. We'll figure out how to do it. And if that were to happen, and IRCC actually processes the application, provides them with the necessary documentations, would your department be able to bring in evacuation flights to bring them out to Canada safely?
Mr. Topel.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. I believe IRCC has the requisite authorities on its own in order to entertain that response back for Afghans who have been processed to come to Canada.
Thank you very much. Do I have any more time, Mr.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. All right. On documentations, Canada is providing documentations to Ukrainians urgently. Can we not do the same for Afghans?
Mr. Topel, you have 10 seconds.
I think that's a question that's best addressed to IRCC. Unfortunately, it's not within the Global Affairs as Canada's purview. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan, and right on time. Here we go. Now we go to the second round, and we'll have for the second round we'll have Mr. Helland for 5 minutes, Mr. Al Khoury for 5 minutes, and then Mr. Brunel for 2.5 minutes, and Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes. So, Mr. Helland, go ahead, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. My first question is for Mr. Salowitz and Mr. Hill. Were either of your departments ever contacted by the government or briefed before August 2021 about Kabul or anything about Afghanistan falling?
Mr. Salvich and then Mr. Hill.
I think I'll turn this question over to Mr. Topel. I'm on the humanitarian side. I'm not aware of that information.
Honorable member, you okay with that? Mr. Topel, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. So as the minister had said correctly, there has been active monitoring through our Five Eyes and through our people on the ground on what has been transpiring in terms of daily reporting in order to understand both the fragility of the situation.
Respectfully, Mr. Topel, I'm talking about before August 2021. Was your department ever briefed on Kabul falling?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. As I had said, prior to the fall of Kabul, over the years preceding, we have been doing daily sit reps on the situation on the ground.
Let's go through the chair, if we can. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Topel. So again, was there in the year before August 2021, within that year, between August 2020 and August 2021, was your department ever briefed that Kabul was going to fall? And what was that conversation like, and when did that happen?
Mr. Topel.
So, Mr. Chairman, as I said, we have been doing active situation reporting over the course of that year that
okay, I don't feel like I'm getting an answer on this one at all, so thank you. Ms. Lawton, you had mentioned that that it was a situation that happened. I mean, like it happened so quick and it was rapid. According to UNHCR that testified to this committee, they briefed the government as early as January 2021 that Kabul was going to fall. Was your department ever made aware between January 2021 and between August 2021 of anything about Kabul falling?
Director General Lawton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, this is an area that I would prefer to direct to the geographic. From a counterterrorism perspective, we were not focused on the status of any governments, and we were not focused on the particular plight of Kabul so much as the pattern of Daesh and Al-Qaeda in the region. And so I would prefer that this question be directed toward the foreign policy and the geographic.
Ms. Lawton, does your department engage with or do you guys coordinate with IRCC at any level?
IRCC is a key stakeholder and partner and interlocutor for Stephen Stalowitz's section of the department, which does humanitarian assistance. We don't use International Red Cross for an intelligence connection at all. That would not be appropriate.
So, whoever this can be directed to is with IRCC. What is the current concern with not being able to get the Afghan interpreters here? Because we hear that the Minister of Immigration has made some insensitive comments about security threats, but what's currently holding back some of the interpreters to getting here?
Madam Lawton, you want to answer that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As far as the screening procedures are concerned and the Afghans coming to Canada, those questions, and I apologize that it appears to be evasive, it's not my intention at all, but those are questions that need to be directed to IRCC, who has the lead on the screening procedures for entry into Canada.
Mr. Topel, through you, Mr. Chair, it would seem that the interpreters that were here last week on hunger strike have been asking for some of the stuff that Ms. Kwan brought up as well, that the process is taking way too long for them compared to what's happening in Ukraine. Can you explain a little bit why the difference?
Mr. Topel, you have 20 seconds to respond.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I believe that question is unfortunately best are answered by the minister from IRCC because they have the mandate in order related to passage of Afghans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hallan. And now we'll proceed to Mr. Al-Khoury for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to our witnesses. My first question for Mr. Salowicz. Is there any other possibilities for intervention for Canada so that humanitarian assistance can be provided other than through the UN? Mr. Salowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I certainly don't want to leave the impression that the only partners we work with on the humanitarian front are the UN. We do have a variety of other partners that we engage with. We do support the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is a key partner in Afghanistan for supporting medical relief operations. They are currently supporting, if I'm not mistaken, over 90 health facilities right now in Afghanistan. We also work with a number of NGOs, an American NGO by the title of International Medical Corps that's also responsible for delivering humanitarian assistance on the health front. So we do work with others.
Deuxième question.
Second question for Mr. Topol. What is your vision of the financial situation in Afghanistan? How could Canada stimulate the regional economy in order to provide greater stability without, however, formally recognizing the Taliban regime?
Assistant Minister Topol, please go ahead.
I'd like to thank Mr. Chairman for the question. At this point, Canada does not recognize the Taliban diplomatically. They are officially recognized as a terrorist entity, and we also have significant concerns, as the minister has described, in concerns of their treatment of women and girls. And as mentioned, with regards to their inability for education. Therefore, it's very hard for us to recognize them going forward. We do understand that stability economically is very important, and that is why we're very cognizant of the impacts of the people on the ground. And therefore, the actions that we are taking is one of humanitarian assistance as Canada's contributions to provide some stability, some financial stability in the interim.
Honourable Member.
Merci. Cette question peut être...
This question to all of you, if you like, or you can decide who will answer. Given the small room for maneuver that Canadian NGOs have pointed out, is there any recommendation that you might make to address the problem that Canada must go through the United Nations in order to provide humanitarian assistance on the ground?
I would ask the officials to raise the hand signal so I know which one's going to answer, but I'll go to Mr. Topol within the meantime.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a question best addressed by Stephen and then Jennifer. Stephen?
Mr. Selvage, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the minister was clear in saying that there are a number of different avenues that are being explored in terms of trying to address the legal situation. And I think those are probably the ones that we have to continue to work on. That offers the legislative system right now, the legal system or the law in place precludes NGOs from Canadian NGOs from being active. So that's probably the best solution. Thank you.
Ms. Laurent, you have 15 seconds to respond.
No, simply to add that we continue to live in full respect of the Canadian law that is currently in place, and providing as much support as we possibly can to the people of Afghanistan through appropriate channels managed in the international community.
Mr. Alcoy, your time is up, and now we'll go to Mr. Bruno Duceppe for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is for Mr. Topol. There are millions of people in Afghanistan who need urgent help, and I am determined to help the Afghan people. I will work with experienced NGOs to see what Canada can do to help this situation. And do you have any opinion on the amendment of the criminal code as requested by NGOs?
Le Président, pour cette question, je crois que le ministre a...
I think that the minister answered the question.
In terms of how do we address the constraints, but honoring the
Excusez-moi, Monsieur Topin.
Excuse me, Mr. Topol. But maybe you can tell us if there is any opinion expressed with regard to amending the criminal code. Is there any opinion issued by your ministry?
Mr. Topol, you want to answer that?
Merci, le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for the clarification.
At options to understand what's the best way forward.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est que votre ministre...
What I understand then is that you have not issued any opinion on amending the criminal code to help NGOs. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Topol.
Thank you. It's a very complex situation, and that's why it takes time to unpack what are the considerations.
Non, excusez-moi, Monsieur Topin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Topol.
Assistant Deputy Minister finish, then I'll come back to you. I'll give you a few seconds extra. Mr. Topol, you want to add something?
We look, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to continue with my response. So there are various regimes in other countries, and there are different pathways in terms of how do you establish a mechanism, as Deputy Minister McClellan said, in terms of being able to have a full toolkit of within the Canadian government in order to respond to the current crisis in Afghanistan, as well as other crises that may unfold globally in the years ahead. And that's
vous voulez passer le montant. Merci, Monsieur Topin. Je comprends que vous voulez passer.
Thank you very much. The question is a simple one. Have you issued any kind of opinion on amending the criminal code? Yes or no?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Desapp. Your time is up. Now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm interested in that question too. Yes or no?
Mr. Topol, you got the question, or you want Madam Kwan to repeat the question?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. So I need to repeat the answer, unfortunately, which is there is still work being done by the civil service among many departments.
Thank you.
In order to formulate the best.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't mean to be rude. I have limited time. I don't need to hear the same answer over and over again. So I want to move to another area then. We just heard from the ADM that it's up to the Minister in Immigration to make the decision about evacuation flights in Pakistan, including determining whether or not to waive documentation requirements. But when that was put to the Minister then refers it back to other ministries, such as Foreign Affairs, and others. So we have a situation where everybody else is saying it's someone else's responsibility. And retired majors at this witness said someone has to take the lead to get Afghans here safely to Canada. Could you advise to Mr. Topol then, if you have an opinion on who should be taking the lead? Is it immigration?
Mr. Topol.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. It is IRCC that has the mandate in terms of responsibilities for immigration into our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, then I will ask. All right. On the next one, I'd like to ask this question. Witnesses last week talked about needing to take a feminist approach, particularly for Canada, to reach out to France, Germany, and Sweden, to work together with them and to step in where feminist foreign policy is required in this global situation. Is the ministry doing any work in reaching out to these other countries to take a lead and play a leadership role in taking a feminist approach in addressing the crisis in Afghanistan. Mr. Topol.
Mr. Topol, you have 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. We are reaching out to like-minded. We have a senior official for Afghanistan based in Doha who works with like-minded countries, particularly those who share our policy of a feminist foreign policy in terms of condemning the Taliban for the actions that they are taking with regards to the infringement of women and girls' rights. And we continue to engage in a collective vis-a-vis the Taliban to inform them to stop these actions.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Topol. Time is way up. It's 3 minutes. So I'm going to go to Mr. Rapp and Madam Jaid. You both will have 4 minutes each in this round. So Mr. Rapp, Mr. Helen, go ahead, please, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Salowitz, according to Ms. Lawton, one of your key stakeholders is IRCC. Was there any coordination between your unit and IRCC prior to August 2021?
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. I think there's a misunderstanding. ICRC is my partner. IRCC, I work with them in terms of UNHCR mandate, but we don't share information on country-specific situations like this.
Okay, so Mr. Salowitz, what kind of coordination did your unit have in Afghanistan prior to August 2021? Was there any relief going there for the refugee crisis?
Mr. Salowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, we've been active in Afghanistan for decades, responding to the humanitarian needs. And we were responding prior to the Taliban takeover and subsequently scaled up our response.
Honorable Member.
Can you please table what kind of supports that were given before August 2021 by month to Afghanistan?
I can send you that indeed.
Yeah, please, if you could please table that to this committee.
I have it by year, but I don't have it by month.
Okay, if you can break it down by month, please, prior to August 2021. And for afterwards, actually, up until now.
Mr. Helen, if you can go through the
Mr. Chair,
and respectfully, because the officials are here. I'm not that particular, but I just want to give officials that respect.
Respectfully, Mr. Chair, through you, can Mr. Salowitz please table month-to-month documents about supports to Afghanistan through his unit for, let's say, January 2021 until up until now, until February 2022. Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Lawton, you had mentioned that your department was tracking ISIS and Al Qaeda, but what was being done to track? Was anything being done to track Taliban at the time prior to 2021, August 2021?
Madam Lawton, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we try to maintain vigilance over a range of terrorist and violent extremist organizations worldwide, not just in Central Asia and the Middle East, but also in North America and in Europe and in other parts of the world.
Member.
But again, like, does that, just the Taliban itself, because you did not mention, through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Lawton did not mention the Taliban in her response when I asked previously. Were you tracking the Taliban, or was Ms. Lawton tracking the Taliban as well, her department? And if so, was there more concern or less concern about the Taliban compared to Al Qaeda and ISIS?
Madam Lawton, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's an interesting question, and I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability. As we track the Taliban, from my perspective and my position, we're looking at it from a policy perspective, and we're engaging across a range of multilateral platforms with Five Eyes partners and others in ways to engage and control and protect against the threat that terrorism represents worldwide. There are also partners that work from an intelligence perspective that gather the kind of information that I think you're seeking. The other part of my unit, though, looks at the drug trade, for example, and we did spend a tremendous amount of time looking at finances behind the Taliban, the opioids trade, and how the organization functions and works. The other thing we looked at is the relationship between the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, and other organizations. We've now moved to an environment where we're looking at Daesh and ISIS and how they're reaching into different parts of Africa, developing networks there. Now we're looking at them as an organization that isn't territorially focused, but is operating as a broad international network, and it's a very different ballgame.
Thank you, Mr. Hallen. Your time is up. And now we'll go to Madam Jahid for 4 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the officials for all the work which they do. My first question is, in regards to the humanitarian aid which is flowing out of the money announced for Afghanistan, is all the money directed towards individuals living in Afghanistan, or any money is being directed for humanitarian aid to the people who are in the third country? Because many Afghans have flown to Pakistan or Tajikistan or Qatar. So, and countries like Pakistan are not in a situation to make sure that the basic necessities of life are available. So is there any effort being done to make sure that the humanitarian aid gets to those people?
Honorable Member, you have a particular person that you want?
Whoever so can answer that.
Thank you to the officials. Okay, Mr. Salves, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question. Indeed, this is an important issue for us. We're looking at, we do recognize the burden placed on regional countries and the needs of Afghan refugees who have fled the country. And so far this year, we've provided $8.4 million to programming outside of Afghanistan in countries in the region. And as I've mentioned, I think previously, that those funds were flowing through WFP and through UNHCR for their programming in those countries.
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. My next question is in regards to the humanitarian aid which is reaching the people in Afghanistan. What efforts we are doing, or what Canada is doing, to make sure that humanitarian aid reaches to those households who are women only? Because there are many, we have heard testimonies in our last few meetings that there are many households which are only woman-led, and it is really difficult for them to get out of the house based on the situation. So what effort is being done to make sure that the humanitarian aid reaches women and young girls?
Mr. Salves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And indeed, the focus of our humanitarian assistance is always first and foremost trying to reach the most vulnerable. And to the and with that in mind, female-headed households in Afghanistan are extremely vulnerable. There are concerns about access for women, of course, given the changes to the laws in Afghanistan. And we know that these challenges of ensuring equitable access are felt pretty significantly by women and girls. And our partners are, work tirelessly to respond to this. They're challenged by the Taliban daily in terms of accessing women and girls, but they do have a number of things that they do put in place to try to make things work. They have female humanitarian staff present all the time to assist and try to open the door, so to speak, for assistance. They create gender segregated distribution sites for women and girls. They scale up services through mobile teams, for instance, healthcare, so that women and girls don't have to travel to access them. So they are putting in place different programs, but the needs are immense, and the challenge is, and they're challenged to meet all those needs.
You have 10 seconds, Madam.
A quick answer on, Canada announced matching funds. So what response we are getting on that from the Canadians?
Thank you
And how are
very
we
much,
directing that?
Madam
Oh,
Jai.
thank
Your
you.
time is up.
Thank
And now, on behalf of all members of Parliament, on the behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Assistant Deputy Minister Asia Pacific, Mr. Topel, Director General International Crime and Terrorism, Madam Jennifer Lotan, and Director General International Humanitarian Assistant Stephen Saleswiz, and Executive Director and Senior General Counsel Patrick Hill. And thank you for your input to the committee. Appreciate your time and efforts. Very best to you on behalf of the committee. And thank you all the members being respectful of the time. So adjourn the meeting now. Thank you.